Okay, everyone, have a wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Mariel. Welcome, everyone. This is Cass Quenold, and I am one of the Education and Behavioral Sciences section's members at large, along with Yu-Wei Chen. And we have planned this program today as one of our current topics discussions. And I couldn't be happier that Joan Lippincott accepted our invitation to speak to us all today about digital scholarship. And I couldn't be happier with the number of attendees. So thank you all for carving out some time for yourself today to spend time with Joan and learn more about this valuable topic. I really appreciate all of you directing your attention to this important topic, and I hope you've all come prepared with great questions. And feel free to bounce into the chat. Joan and I talked yesterday, and we will be pausing several times during the presentation today to give you a chance to give her a chance to ask your questions. I will be monitoring the chat. You're welcome to enter questions when you think of them, and I will relay those to Joan during those question and answer times. This will be recorded, and the recording will be made available via the listservs where we distributed this information. So we'll send it out to the EBSS list as well as to the other email lists. You're also welcome to contact me if you have any questions about access to the recording. With that, I want to give a lot of time over to Joan Lippincott today. She is the Associate Executive Director of CNI, the Coalition for Networked Information. I'm sure many of you recognize her name from all of her research. She's asked me not to give a full bio so that she can spend more time with you today, but I will let you know that before she was at CNI, Joan was an academic librarian at Cornell, Georgetown, and George Washington universities, as well as SUNY Brockport. So she has a lot of on-the-ground experience in addition to her work as a researcher and deep thinker on library issues. So with that, I'll hand it over to Joan. Thank you very much for agreeing to share your knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much, Cass, for that kind introduction. And I also want to thank Yu-Wei Chen, who heard me talk at her institution at the University of Albany last year and asked me to expand on that talk for you today through the ACRL EBSS webinar. And I also am really pleased to see the turnout for this webinar today. And I've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. I'd want to make sure that all of you have some idea of my organization, the Coalition for Networked Information, or CNI, which is a joint program of the Association of Research Libraries, ARL, and EDUCAUSE. Our program spans a really wide range of topics, and I invite you to explore our website at www.cni.org. Even if your institution is not a member of CNI, we take great pride in having all of our resources open to the entire community. So please come and take a look at our articles, publications, videos, presentations at our conferences, etc. You're all welcome. Now, I want to start in this first segment of my talk on describing some forms of digital scholarship, because on occasion I hear even faculty members talk about it quite narrowly. They can talk about it narrowly in terms of discipline, like thinking of digital scholarship only as digital humanities, or think of it as only a very limited number of technologies such as text mining. But in my view, digital scholarship encompasses many subject areas and many methodologies. Emory University has had a very long tradition in supporting digital scholarship, and if you go to their website, you'll see some examples of the kinds of products that they've collaborated on. This is just one part of their website. I couldn't capture all the different kinds of things that they have in one screen capture, but just to give you an idea, the Sacred Matters, the first item that they list under their publications, is a web magazine of public scholarship, so something that's intended to translate academic scholarship for the public. Their Southern Spaces, the middle item, is a peer-reviewed open access journal. But not only is it a peer-reviewed open access journal, it's a multimedia open access journal. So another type of publication or output of digital scholarship. And then the third one listed, the Virtual Rome project, includes a virtual experience and a zoomable version of a map of a 1676 plan of Rome. So you can see just three variations of types of outputs from a digital scholarship program. We know that in research we have many things that are coming out that are not just text in journal articles. And so at the University of North Carolina, you can see that they have helped to produce something that's really important in public health and medicine. During the height of the Ebola crisis, they were producing this map in their research hub that helped track the spread of the Ebola disease. And so mapping technologies are extremely important, but not just in geography or not just in public health, but the humanities disciplines are using mapping a lot more than they did in the past, and helping students and researchers understand trends and developments in history by actually seeing those developments in visual form, in this case in maps. So when I first came across this website called Invasion of America, before I read the description, I thought, well, what is Invasion of America? Is this something to do with 9/11 or something? And then I read further and found that it was the settlement of North America by Europeans and pushing into the lands occupied by our Native American communities. And at the bottom of each of those maps, you can see a timeline, and you can move the cursor along that timeline. And I took two snapshots along various parts of the timeline to illustrate how the Europeans encroached on the Native American territory as they moved westward through history. You can see that this would be a much more compelling way to show students, whether they were in high school or college or just in the public, the occupation of America by Western European settlers than just reading it in a text description. I think that we're going to see various levels of support for digital scholarship. Some support will be given at the local level on the campus. Some may be through consortia, some may be through national or even international programs. And so HathiTrust has developed a research center where they will support a limited number of researchers in doing analysis of the great text corpora that they've compiled through the HathiTrust. So researchers work directly with people at their research center to develop a strategy to mine the materials there to look for trends or to analyze the way certain words were used, or all kinds of subjects that can be detailed through the text that HathiTrust has gathered. And I think, again, we may see more centers like this developing in specialized areas so that each institution doesn't have to have the expertise to do all types of data analysis or exploration. And then I want to mention going kind of even farther in new types of technologies, 3D representations. So this Mapping Gothic France, which was initially developed at Columbia University and also with input at Vassar College, is a mapping, not only a mapping project of where cathedrals and other buildings were in Gothic France, but it reconstructs many of them with 3D representations on this website. So it's another example of outputs of digital scholarship. And then finally, I want to mention that in many of the projects that I've come across, students play a role either using the products of the research in their classroom or being a part of the faculty members' development of the project itself. So this one, developed at Liberal Arts College, Lafayette College, is about mapping Easton, Pennsylvania's Lebanese neighborhood, which was totally plowed through during the urban renewal of the 1960s. Many ethnic and minority neighborhoods were destroyed during the 1960s as new highways were built going right through the middle of some cities. And so this faculty member is using the students in her class to go out into the community and find people that used to live in this neighborhood, and is collecting memorabilia, taking oral histories, and finding photographs, and then mapping these things on a website that also has a mobile app, and providing this rich resource for the community. So it's a research project, something used and created in teaching and learning environment, and an output for the community. So many digital scholarship projects can have all of those kinds of components. So in my view, the digital scholarship programs bring together at the top of this circle the new forms of scholarly communication. That's the linchpin, really, and usually has some interaction with teaching and learning, requires new technologies and tools or software, and importantly, new types of expertise, and often requires teams to come together of faculty, researchers, librarians, information technologists, media specialists, and graduate and undergraduate students. And then often requires spaces, and I'll be devoting part of this webinar to the role of spaces and places in digital scholarship, so I'm not going to go into that right at the moment. If you want some examples, and remember you're going to have a recording of this, so you'll have access to all the URLs that are noted on my slides, you may want to take a look at the profiles being collected by the Association of Research Libraries on digital scholarship support in their member libraries. So there's some rich material there. But again, I want to stress this is not just something for the research libraries. Bucknell University, a liberal arts college, has put together a conference for the last 3 or 4 years on digital scholarship. I enjoyed speaking there this past fall. And if you go to their website, you'll find a conference presentation, PowerPoints, and other materials, and you can see a number of examples of the kinds of programs that are being developed in smaller colleges. Do you think that the name of a program is important? I'm probably neutral on this to a large extent, but I did want to acknowledge that when I use the term Digital Scholarship Center, I mean it in a very generic way, and it does not refer to one very precise thing. And on the left, you'll see a number of other names that existing centers have given to their programs. And on the right, you'll see more names that belong to specific institutions. The EDGE is at Duke University, the Curve is at Georgia State University, and DigiLab is at University of Georgia. And I'm sure I could have found some others, but that was enough. In fact, I should have put up the Digital Toolshed, because that's an interesting one from the Claremont colleges. And also, you'll find that digital scholarship programs do vary in their scope, not only in the disciplines served, but the range of activities. So, for example, I had thought of the University of Virginia Scholars Lab as a humanities-oriented center, but when I visited a few years ago, I found that they serve the humanities, social sciences, and sciences. And many of the programs that I'm familiar with do serve either all disciplines or the humanities and social sciences. And then they provide a range of activities and programs. And you'll find that in some cases, a digital scholarship center or program includes a makerspace, but in other places it doesn't. They may have a makerspace, but it's not in the same unit as the digital scholarship program. Or there may be a publishing program, but it may be in the scholarly communications program of the library and not in the digital scholarship center. Things are sliced and diced very differently in different institutions, and I don't think that there's one right way to do it. It's more that you need to think through how you want to present your program and what makes the most sense in your institution. In 2014, we held our first workshop on digital scholarship at CNI, and this one we required that the people who wanted to participate actually complete a template so we could get a sense of their program and bring in people who were from programs that were actually doing things, not just in a planning stage, because we wanted to gather information about what was actually going on at that time. And we had 21 participating institutions, research universities, and liberal arts colleges, and you can see from this chart that basically all or almost all consulted on digital technologies, most on digital preservation curation, and offered workshops and consulted on project management. In addition, there were lots of other things mentioned, for example, visualization studios. Probably 4 years later, we would have even more doing that kind of thing, and also maker spaces. And then there were things that we didn't include on our own survey, but we had a place where people could write in, and they added all of these different kinds of services or programs that they were offering. And if we'd had them listed on the survey, I think we would have gotten a large response on some of these items, like data services or text analysis, for example. But interestingly, one of the outcomes of that workshop was the consensus that community building is one of the most important aspects of a digital scholarship program. Bringing together people from different areas of campus and helping them get together and learn from each other and leverage each other's expertise. That was a really a compelling theme. So I put together this list of many of the kinds of facilities that we find in digital scholarship programs and services, and this is just one way of looking through when you're putting together your own program, what are some of the things that you should consider whether or not you want to or need to include this in your program. So I'm going to stop here and let you know the next segment will focus on place and space, and then we'll have another pause, and then we're going to talk more about the library as a place for a digital scholarship center and distinctions between what I see as faculty-run institutes or centers versus library-administered centers. So I'd like to pause right now and see if you have some questions on the first part of my presentation.
Joan, this is Cass. While everyone collects their thoughts and thinks about questions to pop into the chat box or to prepare for you, I have a question. Here at the University of Wyoming, we're in sort of the early stages of a digital scholarship program and looking at a digital scholarship center. And I wondered if you could share some of the common pitfalls that libraries run into early in their planning processes.
Well, one of the things that I would step back just a bit from your question and say that I can't emphasize enough the utility of doing some kind of needs assessment as you begin your planning process. And This can involve going out and talking at department meetings, doing individual faculty interviews, especially of faculty that you know are involved in digital scholarship, or using interesting digital resources in teaching and learning, or having students do projects. It can include doing a survey. And also importantly, it can include talking with other campus units like information technology or the research office on your campus or others to understand who's doing what and where people perceive the gaps. And so you'll find some really good examples of needs assessment out there. At the end of the talk, I'm going to give you some resources, including an ECAR CNI paper on supporting digital humanities. But in that, we cite a needs assessment at University of Houston Library, at the Digital Scholarship Planning Workshop that we did at Brown University in November, and the slides are available on that conference's website. You'll find presentations from studies, from needs assessments done at University of Pittsburgh and at Harvard. So those are some great resources to use. In terms of pitfalls, I would say that not being clear on what you want to do and why you're doing it is definitely something that is a concern. And secondly, making sure that you go into this with staff who can deliver on what you're offering. So at least some staff that are ready with the kinds of skills that are needed and have a program or a commitment to offering certain types of expertise that you genuinely can provide through your staff.
Thank you. That's fantastically helpful. I took quite a few notes. Are there other questions for Joan at this time? I don't see any in the chat box, but I will open the floor.
That's fine then, Cass. I'll proceed to place and space. So I think the two questions I hear frequently, one is, does a digital scholarship program require defined spaces? And do some libraries offer digital scholarship programs in physical spaces without using the name? And I'll answer the second one first because that's really easy. The answer is yes. There are lots of libraries that offer different types of things that I've talked about under the rubric or the definition of what are some digital scholarship methodologies or services. And so that's for sure. And it's really up to the library whether they want to name it as a program. I don't think that's a supremely important thing. But what I would say is explaining what you do is really important. And on the right, this is a large screen display, sorry, from the Hunt Library at North Carolina State University, showing their visualization services, the different physical spaces they have, and then if you tap on those screens, it'll go further down to the staff that support it and what they do and how you get access. It's really wonderful information to convey to your user community what you have and what you do. So, does it require space? Well, we saw that most digital scholarship programs offer workshops. Some offer other types of training, and some offer courses or even certificate programs. So you do need space to offer these programs, but does it have to be space that's only used for those? No. No, you could have workshops in your regular space that you use for instruction in your library, as long as it can accommodate the hardware and software that you need to provide those workshops. At the Claremont College's library, one of their renovated areas, they developed this section that's quite versatile. So they have this large screen on the wall that can be used for presentations, demonstrations, workshops, or whatever. And it's set up as a demonstration with the yellow chairs and a presenter table. But everything is movable. In fact, all of that furniture can be even moved into an adjacent very large closet. So it can be used more as a reception area or a poster session area. Or they can take these tables that you see and group the chairs around them to hold a workshop in this space. But again, you need a physical space to do those things, but it can be used for many purposes. Another thing that we saw in the tally earlier is that almost all of the programs offer some type of consultation. And here at Northeastern University, you can see some of the consultation spaces that they have available for their program. Similar kinds of spaces at the University of Georgia, their DigiLab that they opened about 2 years ago, I think. The space does not have to be fancy. You can take a room that used to be used for something else, as they did at Bucknell, and you have a conference table, put some chairs around it. There's some other areas in the room. And one of the things I wanted you to see is on their board, they have ongoing projects, and they have the project name and the staff that are involved. And this is just a great way to work on without putting a lot of money into a space, but having a place to do this kind of consultation and project work. In public areas, you may need some group workstations for teams working on projects that have specialized software and larger screens than you may find, and that's what they have at the Curve at Georgia State. It's, I think, a particularly attractive setup. And if you look on the far right, behind that first table, there's a tall green item. That's actually kind of a glass whiteboard. Very, very attractive set of whiteboards in different colors that you can move around the space. So you have the screens, you have the table surface, you have the whiteboards. They're all terrific for working in a team on a project. At the Edge at Duke University, they have various types of specialized space for tools for GIS and data visualization. They have project rooms. The one on the left, the stools in the hallway, to the left of the stools, the entire corridor wall is a whiteboard. So people can work on their projects together out there, or they may reserve a group room on the right. Space is also important if you're going to do some large display areas for analysis and interaction, data visualization. Again, a very attractive one at Georgia State. Those workstations I showed you earlier kind of behind that large screen. It's all in this same large room. And then more and more I'm seeing universities and college libraries putting in virtual reality stations. This one, they were experimenting with how they were going to set it up, and this is in the older library at North Carolina State in the Hill Library. And I've seen virtual reality setups recently at Bucknell and at University of Texas, Austin in their performing arts library. As I mentioned earlier, creating places for community. I'm just wondering, did I skip a slide there? Oh, just a second. Yes. Creating a sense of community is one of the important functions of a digital scholarship program or center. And at the Greenhouse Studio at University of Connecticut, they have what they built and they call a kitchen table to bring together project teams to brainstorm, to talk about next steps in a project, and just to work together. It's in the center of that room. Really nice idea. And at McMaster, they have this little break area with a little fridge, a little microwave, a coffee maker, so people can get together, have a break, have lunch together, another way of creating community. And another way here at Emory, we can see them hosting a GIS day with food, very visible, bring people in, show them what you're doing, show what kinds of skills and expertise you have in the library and how you can work with your community on various projects. And also you may want a place for public presentations like they developed at the Young Research Library at UCLA, and I particularly like the exhibit areas in their hallways in that library, those large screens that display digital scholarship projects, making that content visible. So those are a number of examples of how spaces are important in digital scholarship programs, but they don't necessarily have to be spaces defined or only used for those programs. I hope that gives you a good overview of those kinds of spaces. Do you have some questions for me at this point?
Joan, this is Kath. I'm so inspired by so many of the examples you showed. A question that was brought to me and Yue when we were planning this event was about how these libraries who have such impressive offerings for digital scholarship, how have they really built buy-in from upper administration and built the funding to do these really incredible things?
I think that some of it just has to do with fit, mission, relationship between the mission and the priorities of the institution. So, for example, there are we're going to have a talk at the CNI meeting in April from San Diego State University, and either their provost or someone in the high-level administration of their institution decided that digital humanities was going to be one of their priority program areas and hired in a cohort of faculty and also gave some funding to the library to develop a digital scholarship center, and they'll do a presentation on that at our meeting. So in some cases it really has to be it isn't, the library I think can't invent the interest. It certainly can build on the interest of the administration and can educate. So I think one way that libraries can develop the interest of both departments, because sometimes funding comes from, say, a College of Arts and Sciences within the university, sometimes from the provost's office. If it's more science-oriented, say data visualization center or program, sometimes support may come from the university's Office of Research because they see that the library facility can provide some high-end technologies for the campus that some departments can't afford on their own, and so and enhance the research program of the university or college. So I think looking for how you can align what you present as your goals for your program with your institutional goals or your departmental goals or college goals are really, really important. And then ideally to have some faculty champions and also student champions, to have students talking about what they would like to be able to produce in their coursework, new kinds of digital outputs, and making a case for the fact that they need places where they can go and learn about new tools and have the opportunities to do new kinds of work.
Thank you so much, Joan. I think you've answered a question that came in on the chat about collaborative funding from external sources and other stakeholders, so that's excellent. I do not see other questions, so I think, oh, we do have another question about staffing these kinds of spaces, whether it's an office hour type model or keeping space for digital scholarship work available when it's a nice, new, attractive space in a prime location. Great
I'm
question.
going to answer the second question first because I think it's a really important one to think through before you open a space. Some digital scholarship centers have a door that you go through and someone is at a desk usually saying, you know, hi, what are you working on, you know, et cetera. And if the person is, you know, kind of spies this nice furniture or a big monitor and just is doing their homework, they're guided to other areas of the building and say, well, gee, this is really for these kinds of purposes. But doesn't turn away people who are new but have a need to use or have questions regarding digital scholarship. In other cases, these spaces are entirely open. And in fact, I found that when the space is entirely open, yes, indeed, it's very attractive to everyone on campus, and many people will use those spaces who are not actually working on digital scholarship projects. So does that matter or doesn't it matter? I don't want to make a judgment on that because there may be particular circumstances in your community, in your institution, that would make one or the other of those solutions preferable. But obviously, if you limit access, you would have to have someone monitoring, and that has staffing implications. An in-between solution would be that certain hours the facility is limited and other hours it's open. Another way that people have done it who have spaces that are totally open is that they'll put up signs and say, from these hours on this day, this whole area is reserved for a workshop or presentation or whatever, so that it's not available for just general study. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it's something you really, really need to think through.
Joan, a related question just came in. That we're talking about the tension in using the space for traditional study uses and for the actual digital scholarship uses. But there's a related question that came in about the tension between collection space and space for this sort of purpose.
Oh, collection space, did you say?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, collection space is an overall issue that all libraries are facing, even if they didn't take over some spaces for learning commons or digital scholarship centers. At some point, almost every library would outgrow its physical space for its print collections unless it weeded or sent some things to storage. So this is just one other pressure on physical space for collections, and again, that's an individual institutional decision on priorities and how those decisions are made, how they're communicated, etc. I've seen a lot more controversy over removing collections for creating learning commons than I have for digital scholarship centers. I haven't heard it come up nearly as much. There was another question about staffing in the previous question. If you don't mind, I think I'll continue because I have a slide on staffing, and while I wasn't going to address that, the specific question, I will add that when I do. I just want to make sure I have that. Staffing. Okay, right. Okay, so I think I'll move on, okay? So I started to get into why I think a library is a good place for a digital scholarship center. This is the key to me. Libraries have always supported research and scholarship. So why would they not support e-research and digital scholarship? I honestly do. It's almost like I don't understand the question. And I realize that I may be out of sync with the mainstream due to, you know, what work I do here at CNI, but I honestly believe this. I'm very interested in higher education as a whole, and libraries need to support the mission of higher education, and this is where research is going in all disciplines. libraries need to support research. In addition, some people call libraries Switzerland, or they say they're the place that all disciplines can come together and can support the interdisciplinary research that is becoming so important on so many campuses. And libraries have always done this, is to provide a level playing field, a place where people can come even if they can't afford to buy their own, whatever it is, content or technology. And importantly, they have this mission to provide expertise. So it isn't that just that they put out the technology, but they have the staff that will work with, and in many cases partner with, the faculty and the students that use the Digital Scholarships program. The other thing that to me is extremely important is that I believe many of our students today want and need to learn a variety of skills in order to produce new kinds of work in their fields, whether it's an academic field or a professional field that they'll go into after they graduate. And in many cases, their coursework just doesn't provide those opportunities. So I think that the library does a huge service to the entire university by providing workshops and in some cases courses or programs, or just the facilities and the expertise where students can come in and work on projects and gain those skills independently. And now I want to get into an area that Yu Hui particularly asked me to focus on in doing this presentation. And this is one where it is not clear-cut, and I will tell you that I've had some pushback on some of my own thinking, pushback from others in the field on my thinking in this regard. But what I find is that, for example, there's been some reports that were out, and I can think of two in particular, that said, you know, libraries really don't need to be so involved in digital scholarship or digital humanities because we've surveyed faculty and they say, we don't really need you. You know, it's not important. And actually, what I think has happened in those cases are that the main people interviewed for those reports are part of what I'm referring to here as institutes. Many of them may call themselves center. I'm just doing this to help distinguish the two kinds of functionalities. And these are faculty or academic department administered programs where the primary funding is from grants, and usually the focus is on very specific research projects of affiliated faculty. Not any faculty member can be part of this institute or center, often in a defined discipline. And the focus is really on answering new research questions. I want to make it very clear that I'm not saying this in a negative way. This is the lifeblood of universities. This is how some faculty get their research done. It's a really, really important component of institutions. But in many of these cases, the faculty become their own experts in the technologies, or through their grants, they hire their own staff and buy their own equipment, just as they do in the sciences, they do in the social sciences and humanities. It may be a small number, but they exist. This is, to me, a really different creature than a library-administered digital scholarship center or program, where the primary funding is from the, and I say institutional budget, meaning it may be just from the library budget or from a college or provost budget or research office, but a centralized budget, not from a particular department. That the library almost always offers services to a variety of disciplines and users. Not always. Some are limited to humanities, or some only serve graduate students and faculty and not undergrads. But the majority that I've come into contact with have very broad remits. And they have strong interest in life cycle issues. What do I mean by that? They want to be involved in metadata creation, in use of standards, in curation, and in publishing. And so they don't have to be interested in all of those, but you would find that generally more strongly reflected in library administered programs than in faculty or institute programs. But as I delve into this and as people have pushed back on some of my views on this, I've looked further and I really find that there are more jointly administered faculty and library digital scholarship centers than I realized. And often they're funded through various streams. And they have both a research program in which the faculty are heavily involved and what I'm calling here a public-facing program, meaning people can walk in and get a consultation or a workshop that's intended for anyone who wants to take advantage of it. And so they provide a range of activities or programs that are really a combined and through a combination of staff. So in order to kind of figure this out, I look at who develops the goals and the programs. Is it solely the library administration with or without an advisory group of some type? Is it a faculty institute or department? Or is there some kind of joint library faculty governance that makes the develops the goals and programs? Who can use these programs, technologies, and spaces? And I've gone over these, so I won't repeat that, but you can see again, these are the kinds of things that you need to think through and decide as you develop or as you refine your center. So I want to show you some examples that you can go back to and look at the language as you develop your own program. So this IAF at University of Virginia, long-standing, this is where Ed Ayers in the Valley of the Shadow came from. And he's at University of Richmond now, but he started the program, or he was one of those starting the program at UVA. And if we take a closer look, I would call this a faculty-administered center, and their mission is to provide scholars in the humanities with the time, tools, and techniques, etc. So this is a very faculty research-oriented program. And the Scholars Lab is a different entity at UVA, which is a library-administered program. The Center for Digital Scholarship at Brown says that they're a cross-departmental group that supports digital scholarship for the community through scholarly and academic activities and a locus of expertise. In addition, they talk about disseminating the results, and they're actively involved in a publishing research initiative there. The Emory Center, a long-standing center, I would call a library or library IT administered center, and you can see how can they help you with your digital scholarship. They're outward facing. They'll provide expertise and resources. They will partner with you on a project, including talking with classes, and they'll invite you to have a consultation with them. A liberal arts college, Lafayette, their services, they partner with faculty, so a library or library IT administered program that works with faculty and students on digital research projects. So again, library or IT administered program. University of Georgia developed their Digi program or Digi Lab, and that's really a joint program. It's from the outset, it was an initiative of a Center for Humanities on campus, the University of Georgia Press, that does report up through the library and the libraries overall, and they provide resources and services not only in research but also in pedagogy. So you can see the range of these missions and services and programs. So as you think through your own program, is your program going to be a mission-driven component of the library or a faculty research institute physically located in the library or not, or will it be a joint program? How will staff time be allocated? who is considered staff and what are their roles. So if faculty are named as part of the center, what are their roles? Are they part of the public-facing program where they do hours at a desk, for example, for consultation? Or are they really there because they're allocated some workspace and some tools and maybe some programmer support to do their own research? Are there programmers? Are the programmers also involved in other parts of the library's activities? Who's allocating the staff time? And what's the ratio of staff time devoted to one's own research versus the interests of others in the community? I'm finding this is a question I'm hearing about more, particularly as more libraries hire as full-time staff individuals with PhDs who want to continue to work on their own research as part of their duties in the Digital Scholarship Center. In some of the centers, it's not only allowed, but it's encouraged. And in others, I think they've found it to be a surprise that they didn't expect and they didn't negotiate. So what is the balance of staff time devoted to one's own research and the research for others? In addition, some of these centers develop tools as a program of the center. And so, again, there are all kinds of nuances to how this shakes out. So to end and leave a little bit of time for questions, I'm just going to quickly encourage you as you move forward to address all of these kinds of issues in your planning. I'm sure that at least some of you attending today already have digital scholarship program, whether it's a small one or a long-standing one. And even now, it's time often to take a look again at how things are working and where you might want to be modifying your program or thinking differently about how you want to do certain things or how you want to grow your program. When you work with partners, whether it's the information technology unit on campus or the research office or a faculty department, you really need to understand where your goals intersect and where they diverge and come to a clear understanding on especially things like funding, staffing, and who's involved in the community if you're really going to work together in partnership. That may take developing written understandings such as MOUs, and importantly, having a communication and decision-making process that will periodically take stock of where you are and where you want to go together. I really want to recommend this paper that came out of a joint initiative between the EDUCAUSE Center for Applied Research, ECAR, and CNI called Building Capacity for Digital Humanities. A framework for institutional planning. I was co-chair of this group, and I was one that pushed that we expand digital humanities to say digital scholarship. But the consensus of the group was that we call the paper humanities, but explain how it could apply more broadly. So I encourage you, even if you're not limited to humanities, this really has a lot of useful information on all of these topics and gives you an idea of how to move and build your program. In addition, CNI has lots of information on our website, and I've given you some resources there. And that about does it for what I'd like to cover. I've covered lots of topics and hope I've kept you with me, and I'll be happy to answer questions on any of the kinds of issues or anything else related to digital scholarship centers. Thank you.
Well, Joan, thank you so much. We did have a really interesting question come through on the chat. They were wondering if you've heard any of these example universities talk about student retention and high-impact practices related to digital scholarship services, and what you might have to say about those.
No, I have not, but I love the question, because one of the things that I think has been underemphasized in many libraries is the importance of capstone projects for our undergraduate students and the role that digital scholarship centers, learning commons, media labs, and other kinds of programs in libraries can contribute to those kinds of efforts. And we know that capstone projects are one of the factors that are identified in promoting student engagement in their academic work, which we believe helps with retention. And but I have not seen any studies that have looked at this.
Well, that sounds like a publication research opportunity for one of our attendees to take on, I would think.
I would love to see that.
I don't see other questions in the chat, but I'll give folks a moment to compose those. What other questions and issues do you see going forward, Joan, that are of interest or that there's some room for libraries and librarians to explore?
One of the topics that's coming up the most when I visit places is the role of subject liaisons. And it seems to me to be a very natural intersection of subject liaisons and digital scholarship centers. There are some places that are working on developing new skills in subject liaisons. I'd note the program at Columbia University that Barbara Rockenbach is heading there. Basically, they brought together the librarians interested, I think, just from social sciences and humanities in developing a range of skills in using new tools, and they took on a specific project using, I think, some of the library's digital resources and did it as a team project, the staff, the library staff, liaisons doing it as a team project to develop their own skills and honestly their own confidence in being able to offer these kinds of things to the community. Indiana University has also had a program. I've heard them talk about that in their Digital Scholarship Center. And if any of you have who are listening to the webcast, I would love you to add your experiences in the chat window. I think ARL, through their liaison initiative, is looking at this as well. There are programs to develop the more technology-oriented skills for liaisons or others. North Carolina State University has offered one and will offer one again this spring, I believe. And ARL itself has offered one in digital humanities and digital scholarship, a small kind of hands-on week-long workshop. So there are various initiatives out there on the broader scale that do this. Any ideas coming in from the chat?
No, we have a couple of other questions, and I think we probably only have time for one of them.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. SMU is working on improving opportunities for subject librarians. We did have one come in.
Thank you.
The question was, since we only have about 3 minutes left, this might be perfect. And I'll say thank you to all our attendees and to you too, Joan. But if you were to give a quick elevator speech on digital scholarship centers to university admin, what would it be?
It would be, we need to prepare our graduates, whether they're going into the academic world, the professional world, or any type of occupation today, to work in new ways with digital content. And we need students who can not only analyze information and apply critical thinking to information, but we need students who can create new kinds of information products, whether they're in business and creating graphs and GIS referenced kind of marketing aids, whether they're in medicine and looking at new kinds of representations of the human genome, whether they're in transportation planning and looking at real-time data visualizations of traffic, or looking at the solar system and the way that astronomers are using digital data today, or in the communications field and understanding the multimodal ways that we communicate information today. Everyone needs to develop new kinds of skills for communicating and using information today, and digital scholarship programs will help them achieve that. How's that?
That was perfect timing. And I think we've reached the end of our time today. Again, thank you so much, Joan. I have taken pages of notes, and I'm sure our other attendees have as well. And thanks everyone for attending, and to ACRL and the Education Behavioral Sciences section for sponsoring this event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.